Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for spending time with me again today. I'm very, very excited to be chatting with Vanessa Hansen, who makes beautiful lino printed garments. And she's actually wearing one of her shirts today. I'm very excited to see that. Looks beautiful. So, Vanessa, will you tell us a little bit more about what you do and why you do it?
Yeah, so I live in London at the moment, and I come from Sweden originally. Been here
Okay.
for 10 years now with my husband, and I have a little baby now, a little baby boy. Um, and I work. My day job, so to speak, is a pattern cutter.
Okay.
So I make. So it's not surface design; it's making the fabric patterns to cut around for making clothes.
Yes.
Um, so basically, I've been handling fabrics and sewing and making my whole life,
Okay.
and it's also my job now.
Okay.
And then I started cutting lino maybe 2 years ago.
Okay.
I'm not sure why I started, but I always do some art on the side, like when I come home and want to get into something different. I always have some kind of art project, and then I just read about lino cutting and ordered like just a beginner kit.
Mm.
Really cheap beginner's kit,
Mm.
and I just really got hooked. I just really love the cutting and the carving part.
Okay.
It's so nice. And yeah, so I've been making liner prints on paper
Okay.
mostly, and then this summer, I don't know why I didn't start earlier, but this summer I started printing on fabric because obviously I love fabric and making
Mm.
things out of fabric,
Mm.
and I never thought to combine the two. But yeah, so this summer I started printing on fabric as well, and
Okay.
now I'm on that.
It is a process that hooks you, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
Mm.
And I really like the technical aspects of it as well.
Mm. Mm.
Like
Do you ever do any screen printing?
print, it's not just the sketching, or there's so many different steps, and I actually like all of them. But I do,
Okay.
yeah, I really like the carving part
Okay.
a lot. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm the same. I discovered it in 1993 and I'm still fascinated with the process. And somebody asked me the other day, don't I want to do screen printing or digital printing or anything like that? And I said, but I'm not done with the lino yet.
Yeah, have you ever tried screen printing at all?
I have. I have.
Like,
And
really
I don't
nice.
like the process of cleaning the screen and then it gets clogged up. And
Yeah,
and also there's so many steps to get to a finished print. Whereas with lino, I just grab it and carve it, and in half an hour I can be printing already.
yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah,
So
in an afternoon you can just make a new scarf or anything. So
yes,
yeah, it's a
yes,
very hands-on kind of thing.
yes, yes. I think also I when did my very first screen prints, I worked with a guy who liked to use the sun for exposure.
Yeah.
And he would always decide to do it when it was slightly overcast.
Okay, so
And
you
then he
took
would get his timing wrong. And we'd have to start over. So
Okay.
with all these like false starts, it used to drive me nuts.
And
Where
you'd be like, oh, I could have cut so much
you
out.
see.
Oh, God.
So that for me is where I kind of fell in love with the process. It's just that direct. You can go straight to print.
Yeah.
You can dream it up and be printing it in minutes if you really want to.
Do you find that you reuse, do you like store your blocks? Do you use it sort of one time? You dream up a block, you make it, you print it, and then you sort of forget about it? Because I mean, I always have new things going on
Mm,
all the time.
mm,
I just sometimes, I barely finish a block and I just start a new one.
mm, mm.
But do you find that you reuse your blocks a lot? Or do you print one block and then you're finished with it and then you go on to the next?
No, I view them like a library that I can dip into whenever I want to. And very often, so for example, I got a selection of fabrics from a deceased estate. And because there was such a very mixed variety of different things, I will sometimes stand with the fabric in front of me and all the blocks laid out in front of me, and then go, okay, which one feels right for this fabric today?
Yeah.
And I've got some blocks that I made a very long time ago. I had I have a very beautiful block that I think is very beautiful. It's one of my best pieces of work that I did when I was very young still. And I think I carved it in 1998 or something like that. And by 2006, I was using it to create bespoke textiles for fashion designers. And by 2016, I was using it in workshops for students to use when I was teaching. And it's also appeared in my books. So when I published my books, I dug it out again and I did some more prints with that. Um, so I think if you make something that you really like or where it's just a great design, you will use it again and again. And I think that's what's also nice about it. And also, sometimes you want to layer things one on top of the other. So, there's always the possibility to reuse it, which I quite like also.
So because it's quite old, that block then, or it's got a few years on it, what material is that? So because I find that grey lino
Yes,
doesn't age that well, but
yes.
I suppose if you're not using a press, it keeps, or is it a different material?
So you're right about that. That particular one has got damage and has become cracked over time with use. I found it did better with an oil-based ink. So as soon as I switched over to an acrylic water-based ink, it started becoming brittle very fast.
Yeah.
So it's wood block mounted, and then along the way, my sister carved a duplicate of it, which I have because we were mass producing for the fashion industry. So at one stage, it didn't hurt to have two of them.
Yeah.
Um, so my sister made an absolute replica of it that she carved out. So I actually have two at the moment, but I don't use them that often. So I've changed over to the gray rubbery one.
Right. Yeah, I think that's what I use actually as well.
Yes.
Uh,
So for me, this one is much nicer than the one on the Hessian base. The one that's on the Hessian base gets cracked up very, very easily.
I find this dark grey easy to clean as well. You can just
Yes,
have it up tap
yes,
with the brush. Yeah, it's quite
yes,
simple.
yes. And also when I used to teach, often my students used to leave ink on it and then pack it back in the box just like that.
Oh yeah, not yet.
So I found they actually, yeah, I found they're actually quite robust for that process. You can go at them with a scrubbing brush and clean them out, and even scratch the ink out with a carving tool later if you have to. So I do find them more robust than the Hessian one. Certainly, certainly. And what do you enjoy printing on? Do you just do shirts? What other garments are you adding your prints to?
Well, I've tried so much. I'm still in sort of a trial and error kind of stage at the moment. So
Okay.
what I've mainly been doing is scarves or bandanas,
Yes.
and they're in cotton, like 100% cotton, and many of them I've hand dyed
Okay.
myself during the summer, and that's just really lovely. It's kind of a calico, sort of basic cotton, but
Yes.
hand dyeing it, and it's nice to print on, I think,
Okay.
because it's not too thick, but it's still got quite a good body to it.
Yes.
Um, and you can just go wild. So I usually carve, at the moment, I just usually carve lots of little plants.
Okay.
And so I'm really inspired by plants and the forest, like the Scandinavian nature.
Yes.
And yeah, so when I do my scarves, I do I use oil-based ink, so I use
Okay.
Cranfield's Calico Safe wash inks, and because it's got a really long open time.
Yes.
When you have water-based inks, they dry so quickly,
Yes.
and I kind of like mixing the color up as I go along. So I've got quite a big glass slab, and I
Yes.
mix all the colors on there,
Yes.
and they can stay open for days actually.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I can print for a very long time, and I really enjoy that, and the colors will develop and change over a few days. So I'll start out with fairly bright colors, like the basic colors, and then as the days go on, it will be, it will go darker and darker and a bit more
Yes.
dull. But together, the bright and the dull, they make a good mix in the end.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I really like doing that with oil-based
Okay.
inks, but I'm trying now water-based inks as well, and I have to say I don't really like it as much.
Okay. Okay. What do you not like about it?
So the drying is one issue for sure.
Okay.
I think because I'm used to, so since I'm printing mainly on paper, well, I started out printing on paper, I'm just used to the oil-based ink, and I just like the texture of it, and I like the roller, when you can
Yes.
roll it out in
Yes.
quite a thin layer. It's
Yes.
just a really nice texture. But actually, since chatting with you on the Facebook group, the Fabric
Yes.
Facebook group, I've kind of started trying to see this as a different art form. So there's lino printing on paper, and then
Yes.
there's the fabric printing, and
Yes.
they are actually two fairly different things.
Yes. Yes.
And after that, after sort of thinking about that for a while, I sort of accepted more the texture of the water-based inks and trying to get used to using them more.
Mm. Mm.
And also I've been trying to use acrylic retarder. Have you tried
Okay.
that?
Okay.
So it's just a basic, I don't know which brand, but it's actually for acrylic paints.
Yes.
But I add a couple of drops to my fabric printing ink
Yes.
and mix it together, and actually find that it keeps the ink open for just a little while longer,
Yes.
which is nice because then I can mix
Yes.
colors a bit more.
Yes.
And yeah.
So I stopped using oil-based inks because I printed lots of cloth and then had nowhere to dry
Yeah, and it does take a long time to dry.
it. And we were
A week or more.
yes, we were staying
Yeah.
in a small flat and I had every surface covered with these big pieces of cloth, and my boyfriend was like, when are you going to
Yeah.
pack these away? And I'm like, I can't pack them away, they're still wet. So then when I went into mass production, I explored the acrylic water-based inks. And I must tell you, I wouldn't print with anything else anymore. So I use an acrylic water-based screen printing ink. And all that story about extender is a load of nonsense. I get a spray bottle, one of those spritzer bottles. And I actually water the ink down quite a lot. And the secret really is the sponge roller. So you still want to get the ink, like that thin coating that you like to get with the rubber roller with the oil-based inks. You still want that same principle where it's kind of conditioned into this very smooth, thin coating around the sponge roller. But it can be runnier than you think.
Okay.
And I don't know from brand to brand. Some brands might only work with an extender, but I would experiment with, if I was you, just with a spray bottle and some water, just light layer of water over the top to keep it going.
I actually tried that today, but not to get the right consistency, but because it was drying so quickly,
Yes,
and you end up wasting so much ink because it
yes,
dries on the inking slab,
yes,
and you just scrape it off and bin it.
yes,
So I wanted to try and see if I could reuse it. So that's basically what I did, just sprayed a little bit and sort of
yes.
mixed it in.
So I actually put mine onto a bucket lid, so it's got a lip, so it can be very runny.
Oh, I see.
Yes, yes. And when I finished with mine, I recover it. I put it in bottles, and then I was actually thinking about it when you were mentioning earlier how you like the colors to develop and mix and blend. Is I always then scrape that all off while it's still wet, and I pour it into a bottle, and then I end up with these beautiful bottles of like really strange colors that I would never normally use, but that print beautifully.
Yeah.
Um, and it can be very, very runny. I've used very, very runny screen printing inks. Those acrylic water-based inks are amazing. The ones where they tell you to buy extender, I really think that extender is just it makes them more money, but a lot of those products work just fine being watered down with plain old water.
So how do you find the coverage? So when you water it down, do you find that it's more, is it more see-through on the fabric?
Yes, yes, it
So
is.
you definitely print on a lighter fabric than the color you're using.
Yes, and so I hold a different expectation because I've worked with lino for so long. I have a different expectation of it. I don't expect it to look like screen printing.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to make it look like screen printing. Um, I do sometimes use inks that are very opaque. So from the screen printer, you can get a translucent ink and, and an opaque one. So if I want to print on dark colors, then I very definitely look for an opaque ink. Um, because then it stands out on the dark colors much better. And having said that, sometimes the translucent inks are very nice if you want to create that soft, they're not there kind of a look. So
Yeah.
I like to sometimes play with white ink on a white fabric. Or I take black ink and then put just the tiniest drop of a silver metallic in with it, and then print it on a black fabric, and then it's almost like a damask where you can see it in one light but not in another. Um,
That's nice.
yeah, so if because like with paper, your print has to stand out, but with fabric that gets
Yeah.
worn and that moves under light and stuff like that, you may want a more subtle finish, maybe for bridal wear or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, so I like playing with the there not there stuff also, and some of the screen printing inks you get them in UV colors, you get them in metallics, you get them in pearlescence. So they can be a lot of fun to play with, especially when you start mushing them together and
Yeah.
combining them.
I have a pot of gold screen printing ink actually.
Okay.
But you would just mix that with any other color
I would.
and then you'll kind of
I would.
make a
Yes,
interesting.
I would. I would.
Haven't tried that yet.
The only thing I do recommend is that if possible, work within brands because you don't know what chemicals in the one and what's in the other. I have mixed different brands together before and it didn't end well.
Yeah, they get grainy and they can.
Yes, yes, and
Yeah,
like glue, and they don't, they don't always agree with each other. So that blending of colors and stuff I normally do within a brand. But don't be scared to throw it all together and see what happens.
yeah. I think I'm being very conventional when it comes to the use colours. Only because you know how I started. You have
Yes,
to plan your print, and then you make many looking exactly the same.
yes,
And you want these specific colors, and
yes.
yeah,
And also you're used to working in the fashion industry where, the sample sets the expectation. And then everything that's delivered on that sample has to look the same. You must remember, I come from the other side of it where I've been teaching lots of people and very often on a shoestring budget. Now, at the end of the workshop, students are amazing at pouring all the ink out on all the ink trays and then throwing it down the sink. And I'm way too frugal for that. I come afterwards, I say, leave your ink trays where they are, and I gather it all back and put it back in the bottle, and then I work with that.
yeah, yeah,
Next class, they go back out there again.
yeah,
So I actually, and also I learned a lot about color when I was making bespoke fabrics for the fashion industry. I'll never forget, we had a job where we were actually tie-dyeing a beautiful finish for it was for decor for cushions for a fancy island resort. And I made the most beautiful tie-dye. And then the lady came to me and said to me, you know what? It's not quite the shade of duck egg blue that I gave you. So I spent 3 weeks color sampling to get the exact recipe color match for that color. And then when I produced it for her, she looked at it and she said to me, it has no life. Please will you make the production run in the color that you gave me first?
Yeah.
So we might have an idea about a Pantone match for a particular reason. And then as you're printing it, you go, I'm not feeling this.
Yeah.
And trust those instincts. Trust those instincts. If you're not feeling it and you want to throw a bit of black in or you want to throw a bit of brown in and see what happens, um, you can find some really, really beautiful colors in that play space. So just enjoy mixing your colors. You can have a lot of fun with them.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to try mixing gold with, because it's the same brand. So I have 2 pots of metallic screen printing inks,
Yes.
and then just the normal fabric printing inks, but it's the same brand. So I'm
Okay.
thinking they'll go together.
Yes, yes. You're never going to come back from that.
Yeah. I'll have to look after my
Mummy's playing now.
Yes. Work.
So what have been your biggest challenges with transitioning from paper to fabric?
It has been basically chasing the perfect print.
Okay.
Yeah. And I've spent so many hours on the actual printing technique, until you came along. Actually. And then I thought, okay, I need to try and loosen up. But I mean, because I practice so much, sort of chasing this paper quality of the print,
Yes.
I've actually refined my fabric printing skills a lot.
Yes.
So they have been hours well spent, and
Yes.
you sort of find weird little techniques that work for you, and you don't find them anywhere else, like with a spray bottle or adding some weird little medium. I mean, the retarder, I think I've had it for years, from some time when I thought I would do acrylic painting, and I thought they'd dry quickly then as well. So I just put that in, and it sort of worked. And my favorite burnishing tool is a baby food jar as well.
Yes.
You kind of find things that work for you.
Yes.
So, but yeah, I think for me the most frustrating part of this has been trying to get a quality print as if it was printed on paper.
Yes. Yes.
And actually, so I have a small craft press. It's an X cut. I don't know. Do you know that?
Yes.
It's actually what's it called? It's it's a die cut machine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I use that a little bit on paper, but then I actually thought to feed the fabric through. But so for some of my scarves, I can fold them up in 3 layers, and then I can feed it through the machine. And with the oil paint, it gives really nice results. So that's the most paper-like print I've managed.
Okay.
Yeah, but I've given that a rest now, and I'm working with the water-based inks and just hand pressing.
Yes.
And trying to get into that as well.
So I think it might be a worthwhile exercise for you. So because you're also working on finished garments, there's a lot invested in the expectation of what the print needs to look like when it's finished, because you're putting like very specific focal points on that better look right.
Yeah.
I learned the most about printing when I printed long lengths of fabric with tiled prints edge to edge. And then it gives you a slightly different view on the fabric, because remember, somebody's going to come afterwards and lay a pattern and cut it. Okay. And then if that imperfection is stitched in under the armpit, who's going to know?
Yeah. And also adds to the interest of the garment itself. It's
Yes.
just that when I do it, I, you know what I mean? Like when someone else do it, I think it, it looks lovely. And I actually managed to let go a bit of this sort of perfectionism during the summer when I was dyeing fabrics, because it's so unpredictable.
Yes.
I think, at least as a beginner,
Yes.
but I just really loved that.
Yes.
So you never quite know exactly what the shade you will get in the end. And
Yes.
I really enjoyed that process, and I'm trying to sort of get that mindset on the printing as well,
Yes.
because it does add to the interest of the finished garment, I think.
Yes. Yes.
Rather than it being machine printed, because then why don't you just go and get some machine printed fabric?
And I would challenge you the next time you're in your fabric store, when you're looking at machine printed rolls of fabric, take a very close look at them and see how many of those have flaws in the printing.
Yeah.
Because people buy fabric that has been the print not great off the roll forever, because your average person is not discerning enough. Only a printer will know.
Yeah.
But the average person is not discerning enough. They're still going to buy that cloth. If they like the way it feels and they like the colors, they'll buy it, even
Yeah.
if the printing isn't that great. And when you
Yeah.
start to look very closely at what's already on the shelves, you'll notice that even machine printed fabric is not perfectly printed.
I should really know this, because this is exactly the same in the fashion industry. Obviously, I have a really hard time buying clothes because I make them
Yes.
as my profession. So looking at garments in just, I don't know, H&M, let's say, I'm very quickly, I know what a garment could be, but
Yes.
obviously no one will notice. And
Yes.
you can take two sizes, I don't know, size 10s, and they will actually be quite different. There can be such
Yes.
a massive difference between them.
Yes.
And I'm used to that because, I'm used to looking at clothes. So I just need to sort of get into that thinking, I think, when it comes to printing as well. Because it is the same thing, really.
The other thing that can be quite forgiving for you if you're starting out on printing on fabric is to print on some colored fabrics and some things that you've dyed but that have got lots of contrast in the dye work. Because if you've got a very textured background color, then you can really make terrible prints and they'll still look good.
Yeah.
Because then you've got this rich story coming out and everything is different. It's
Yeah.
that white paper is very, very harsh, and it's
Yeah.
quite a it's quite a harsh starting point actually for a printer. Whereas if you start
Yeah.
printing on colored backgrounds, they're way more forgiving of smudges and
Yeah.
things like that.
I
So
was actually, because you posted on Facebook recently, asking if people had printed on fabrics that already had
yes,
a pattern. So I looked through I'll show you actually, I have my fabric stash next to me.
yay,
I'm
lovely.
gonna print on, let's see if I can you see, it's like a pinstripe,
Yes,
like a cotton pinstripe. So I was gonna
yes,
actually try printing on this.
that'll be
Um,
lovely.
yeah, I think so. And I think that would be a good way to try and
Yes,
relax my
yes, and
That's
and
it.
and also try printing it edge to edge, like when your
Oh,
child is sleeping
yeah.
and you've switched off your phone and told your husband now this is your time,
Yeah.
then just stand and print it from one edge to the other, and by the time you've finished that, you get into a rhythm,
Yeah.
and after that it won't be hard.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Try to do that. So do you put a blanket on your whole table? Do you have a blanket
Yes,
to pad your whole table?
yes, yes. And that's the secret. Without the blanket you don't get good registration.
Print on I have print on two pieces of felt, but they're quite
Okay.
small.
Yes,
I
yes.
need to find something bigger. Maybe a towel?
Towel
Can a
will
towel?
work, but it's a little bit coarse. I've used towels when I've forgotten my blankets at home when I've been teaching.
Shouldn't it too much, should it? It should still have that kind of.
Yes, so that's a good point. So a single layer blanket works better than a double layer. If it's a thick blanket and you double it up, then it's too wobbly, and then it starts to do a bit of a blurred thing around the edges of the block.
Yeah.
Especially if you're using a rubber roller on the back.
Yeah.
Hand press, it doesn't move around so much, but like if it's a very long block like this one, then by the time I've pushed the roller from here to this side, then you end up with a shift happening.
Yeah.
And if your base is too thick, then that shift will be more. Like the sweet spot is one blanket thick.
Right.
And I don't know.
What kind of blanket?
So I don't know if where you live you get they're kind of a grey blanket that's made out of waste material that they very often use for dog kennels and things like that. So you can see them in the pet shop.
Is it almost like it's a thin felt?
Yes, it looks like a messy felt made up with all bits. I find those are perfect. And you only need one for your whole table, and then you just reuse it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I probably have something I can use. Stash.
So I've got a blanket that I use that I was given when I was 4 years old.
Really?
Yes.
I love that. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been with me a long time. I love printing on it.
Wow.
Eventually got too cool.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you mentioned that you had a question for me about tiled blocks.
Yeah. So I'm trying. So obviously, I want to try what you said, to print a whole length of fabric. But obviously, to do that, you need. It doesn't necessarily have to be a repeat print, but a tile that will go nicely edge to edge.
Yes.
So just your process in creating a tile like that.
Okay.
I find it so hard to know where to start, because I obviously just mainly do shapes like plants and stuff. So
okay. So I'm going to talk you through a stamp like this one that I've made.
Yeah.
So what I'd normally do is I would normally begin with some grid lines. Can you see I've drawn lines with ruler here?
Yeah.
So there's two diagonals and then these here. And then I kind of work with that whole principle that they teach us in design school, that it's a 2/3, 1/3 ratio. Works well. So then what I try to do is I try to put focal points either on center points or on the 2/3 mark. Will then create that when I then repeat, things line up on those places. And then of course it's about which direction you then turn the block, because okay, this block, the way it's been made, will print very much the same in each direction. But sometimes I'll do something that's more asymmetrical, like this one here. I don't know if you can see it. So it's white, it's not very clear. But so here I've got a point on the 2/3 mark here that will line up when I turn it in certain directions, but not in others.
Yeah.
So the trick is to create focal points on the edge of the block, which then when you repeat it will line up with another one and create a focal point there across the division line, and then it blurs for your eye that straight rectangular thing and starts to lead your eye into other patterns and shapes. So it's just about creating focal points on the edge of the block that will then line up when you repeat them. And then that blurring automatically happens because your eye will be drawn to the focal point instead of to the line. And then also, like soft shapes like this work quite well, because if I print it very close together or a little bit further apart, it doesn't really matter. There's some forgiveness in the gap. And so I like to use these kind of soft shapes that are not kind of, I try and get away from straight edges here, because then when those straight edges overlap, then it it becomes harsh on the eyes. But if you've got these flowing shapes happening and they shift a little, because when you're printing with a small block like this on a long length of fabric, at some point it does kind of start
Yeah.
wandering in its
Yeah.
own direction, and next thing you've got this gully this wide and you don't know how it
Yeah.
happened. And then you've got two choices for correction. You can either restart with everything tiled up, but to try and pull it back again is very often almost impossible. And then when that happens, I still go back to the fact that, okay, this is very likely going to have a pattern laid on top of it. If I lay the pattern carefully and cut it, I can cut around this or arrange the panel that this
Yeah.
space appears somewhere where you
Yeah.
don't have to look at it.
Maybe you'd print like a length of fabric, and then when it goes too far out, you sort of start again.
Yes,
And then
yes,
that does give you two similar lengths of fabrics, I suppose, the ends being the same. Actually, interesting. I'll have to try this. Do you draw directly on the block? So you were mentioning the grid lines on that grey block you have.
yes,
So do you draw them straight onto the lino?
yes. I use a normal pen and a ruler.
So you start directly on the lino?
Yes, yes. And so I very, very seldom draw an idea and then convert it to lino. I used to do that many, many years ago, but along the way I discovered the joy of I start with some grid lines. I've even got some French curves that I sometimes use to put shaping on. And then once I've got like a flow happening in the shapes and the different quadrants, then
Yeah.
I just start to carve out detail in between. And then because those flow lines are already laid in the background, then things tend to line up and repeat themselves and then move across the borders as you tile it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So do you have like a maximum size of a tile? Like, is a full A4 piece, is it too big, or would you use a half? Do you know what I mean? Like, how big
That's a
would your
great
piece
question. That's a
be?
great question. So if I was going as big as A4, I would actually try and wood block mount it because they tend to, when you place them, there's the sag, and the heavier they get, the trickier that is. Then when you lay it down, you end up with blurring on the edges. And also when you rubber brayer over the back, then if it's a very long length and you start at the one side, by the time you've pushed it to the other, it's kind of wrinkled up and shifted.
Yeah.
So there can be some shift by the end. So I don't often make bigger than A4. And also, so in terms of the wood block mounting, a lot of people prefer the wood block mounting because then it does away with the sag. But I personally like to work with them soft like this. I find that for my personal use, registration is really easy. Where I put it, where I see it, is where it is.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've got a big block on the back, then you've got to kind of peer around it and it kind of
Yeah.
gets in the way.
Yeah.
Aside from the fact that I'm no good at cutting them, I have to ask somebody else to cut them the right
Yeah.
size.
Yeah, I would have to do that as well.
Yes, and that's a whole other process. Now I've got to convince somebody to help me with this thing. No.
Yeah. I mean, we're even in lockdown in the UK, so the
Yes.
timber aren't even open.
Yes, yes. Then the other thing I like about working with them soft like this is you can work cross construction on garments. So I think you've done it there with your print. Is it going across a construction line here on the shoulder? I can't see.
No, it's actually flat.
Is it flat? Okay.
Yeah, it's,
So when I was working for the fashion industry, the designers would say to me, you know, what are your requirements? And I'd say to them, I need flat fabric to print on. And then
yeah.
I'd get the dress complete with bones and lining and the zip in already. And then they'd say, oh, I thought you could print on this.
Ah,
And when your block is floppy like this, you can.
yeah.
You can even print on things like pantyhose. So you put the pantyhose onto a mannequin leg with some padding underneath, and then you shape the block around the shape. And it can go across a seam line, you know, and a dot and even a zip at the back.
Yeah.
Um, Because there's some give in it, and I know it's quite a scary place for some people to work. It's like, oh my goodness, that's so loose, but you need a bit of loose when the garment's already got a shape to it.
That's really interesting, actually. I do have mannequins to work on, so
Yes,
I might dress them in some calico, and then, because I
yes,
do like the idea of printing on finished garments as well. So I picked this up in a thrift shop, in a church
yes,
shop, and I like the idea of well, upcycling, or giving something old a new life, and
yes,
more
yes,
of a slow fashion way of dressing. So that would actually be a really good idea to try. It's
yes,
just that when you print on a finished garment, you have this extra anxiety of
yes,
ruining a whole garment,
yes,
rather
yes,
than if you have real fabric, you can always cut it off and start again. So
yes,
I think that, but I guess it's just something you have to get over, like try a few times and just
yes, yes,
potentially ruin a few things, and then
yes. And my solution to that is, if you've done something and you feel it's ruined, it's just not finished yet.
yeah.
So
I
you
like
can
that.
always, that print that was not quite right, you can use as a drop shadow and put a lighter print over the front of it. Or it's actually happened to me in a workshop once. So we had a workshop where the space was very tight that they gave us to work in. It was a nightmare. Like, the ladies were like sardines in a can trying to print on silk scarves. So, of course, at one point, one lady got green ink all over her friend's silk scarf. Now, as a teacher, I can't just keep replacing silk scarves, and I can't, it's costly for me to just keep giving them more materials to work with. So I said to the lady, bear with me on this. And then we took more paint and we just poured it over, and we took a knife and we spread it on like butter. And
Yeah,
then we printed around and over that. And we still managed to get a result that was joyful and wonderful, and that she enjoyed wearing.
yeah,
We just had to talk her into letting go of the expectation that it was going to be what she planned,
yeah,
and accept that it would become what it wants to be. And I think if you're going to work on thrift store garments, that you have the space to do that, because your customer doesn't have the expectation that you're supplying them with a range of 20 of the same thing in 4 different colorways
yeah,
and 6 different sizes. Your business is bespoke, one of a kind. Um, and when all else fails, there's always sequins. You can sew in sequins.
do you do that? Oh yeah.
Sometimes,
Very cool, yeah.
yeah, all it needs is a bit of bling to distract the eye.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. Yeah, being a pattern cutter, obviously, I'm very numbers mean a lot to me,
Yes.
and I used to cut manual patterns just with
Okay.
a ruler and a pencil, but now a lot of companies are using software. So
Yes.
it's essentially you do the same thing, but you use the tools in a software. And
Yes.
obviously, having a software where you can measure tenth of a
Yes.
millimeter, you get obsessed with the numbers. Every line, and you match up, and you have all the notches, and all the seams line up, and if it's 10 centimeters, it's 10 centimeters and nothing more.
Yes.
So obviously, yeah, I have to be very careful, and yeah, I'm very perfectionist in my work, so I think that spills over
Yes.
on my art,
Yes.
but
Yes.
definitely working on that.
Yes. And I don't think it's a bad thing. And I think that the very freedom of working with the lino in a new way is going to be a bit of a relief for you,
Yeah,
because it doesn't have to be perfect. It really doesn't have to be perfect. Um, people always say to me, "Oh, but that looks so perfect," and there are mistakes in a lot of the stuff that I make as well. And
yeah,
it's, put it in a different context with people who don't know, and they think it's beautiful.
yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, it's the same in actually, in fashion. You make something and you know there are things that you, but no one knows, you know.
No one knows.
For garments, and you know, you put a bit of spring in the skirt, and everybody loves it. So I just need to try and apply that to my
Yes.
art as well. I did make a start of it because obviously these birds are mirrored, so I had
Yes.
to cut two of them,
Yes.
and they will never be the same. And
Yes.
I just really embrace that. So they look the same. Everyone will perceive them as being the exact mirror image, but
Yes.
you know, they aren't the same at all. If you
Yes.
you know, lay them on top of each other, you would
Yes.
definitely see that they are different. But yeah, like we said earlier, it actually adds to the interest as well.
Yes. Yes.
Not being
Yes, and
perfect.
human beings aren't that symmetrical. I mean, when you look at our faces aren't that symmetrical. In fact, when you see someone whose face is too symmetrical, it looks a bit disturbing. So on the body, it doesn't matter. Clothes, your right leg's not the same as the left one. There's slight differences. So I think that we're way more accustomed to seeing those differences than we realize.
Yeah, yeah,
So
that's probably.
so I think you can let go a bit.
Oh well, I'll try. I'll start with my stripy fabric.
I'm
Actually
dying.
started on a tile today, so I'll
Okay.
take your advice on the focal point as well and try and see
Okay.
if
Did
I
that
can.
make sense to you?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's just hard to know where to start.
So
But
put them
the
at the
grid one,
2/3 mark and just do that.
yeah,
Put them at the. I know it sounds extremely simplistic,
mm,
and that really is the secret.
interesting. I will try. Yeah,
because even if there's differences in the focal point where the two blocks then meet, because there's still a focal point there, even if there's a different thing happening on right and left, your eye will still organize to the center.
together. Yeah,
Yes. So there can be quite a bit of variance. You don't have to worry too much on what you do on either side. There's still, I wonder if I can
yeah.
show you on this one maybe. This one
But
maybe
do
makes.
you don't actually plan then. So on the tile you had there, the grey tile, you don't
Yes.
plan that they will meet. You just do the 2/3 mark and you do something you like, and then it looks good, basically.
Kind of, a lot of the time. So maybe this one's a good one to explain on. So I don't know if you can see. Let's get it up here where you can see the whole block.
Yeah,
So can you see where the block is sitting here?
yeah,
There's the block there, like that. Okay.
yeah,
So this half and this half look quite different, don't they?
yeah.
Just try and
Yeah,
get.
I remember you posting that actually. Yeah,
Yes,
it's
so this half and this half are quite different. So when we print it end to end, it gives us this perfect round, and when we turn it the other way, it gives me that.
yeah,
And all that I did was make sure that I had a focal point in the center where they would meet,
yeah,
and both are beautiful.
yeah,
And when I carved this block, I was focusing on the wings, and then I was like, okay, well, we need the block to cross over on the border, so I must shift a focal point somewhere to the edge of the border. But what the detail of that was going to be was really just fitting in around the wings that I already had.
yeah,
Does that make sense?
yeah.
Yeah. So
It's
it's don't
actually nice.
overthink it. You don't have to
Yeah.
think too hard.
Thinking
It's
is what
not
I do.
rocket science.
Okay, I shall start a tile and print my stripy fabric.
Yay!
Yeah,
Yay!
I
Yeah,
definitely
you
will give
sound
it
ready.
a go.
Thank you so much for a very enjoyable conversation. That was awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
So, if anybody wants to find you online and buy your beautiful lino printed garments, where can they find you?
So it's on Vanessa Hansen Studio on Instagram and Etsy.
Okay.
It's yeah, it's
Okay,
spelled like
fantastic.
this.
Okay. And I will
Yeah,
include those links in the description of the video when I post it.
cool.
Okay. Thank you. That
Thank
was awesome.
thank you.
Bye.